what's up, guys? Welcome back on Sport Vitamins. Today we are here for episode 27 with a great guest, Nick Lagios. Nick recently became the general manager of the first G League team based in Mexico. I'm talking about the Capitanes of Mexico City. Being the general manager of a professional basketball team may be one of the toughest jobs in professional sports. GMs are the eyes and the ears of the owners, and they also have to work together with the head coaches, inspiring players to do things they never thought they could. So, without further ado, here's the episode with Nick Lagios. Hey Nick, what's up? Welcome on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for accepting my invitation, and it's a huge honor to have you on today, and thanks for squeezing me into your busy schedule.
Of course, whenever I can go on my friend's podcast, I'm happy to do so. And yeah, our time zone's a little different, but we got it.
So Nick, why don't we start with a little background?
Perfect. So with me, I worked with Stanford University first. Before that, I worked in community relations with the Denver Nuggets organization. And from that, I was able to see all these opportunities in sports that I didn't know existed. I thought I just love basketball and I'll just be a fan my whole life. But from that internship at Colorado, I was like, oh, I can actually have an internship. I can have a career in sports. So from that, I worked at Stanford. I was an intern, and then the video coordinator quit. So I became video coordinator. I was doing 2 jobs for the whole season, and I was working nonstop. People ask me how many hours, doesn't matter. I sleep 5 hours a night. And when I wasn't sleeping, I was working. So I had a good experience and I learned a lot. I got through it, but it was a really hard experience at Stanford. And I was burnt out after that. So I actually moved to Australia. I worked in a bunch of different roles in Australia. I didn't get paid in any basketball role, but I worked with the Sydney Kings or volunteered with them, the Australian Institute of Sport, and then helped out with some high school basketball as well. Then from there, Mark Madsen with Stanford, he was assistant coach. He moved to the Lakers and he made that connection when I came back from Australia. So I was fortunate enough to get hired as, I don't even know what I was. I was like the lowest of the lowest on the totem pole in the Lakers organization. And I was there 5 years. I kind of worked my way up from the video room, the video and coaching side, to the front office side, which I've always wanted to do, the more GM route. And then I guess a couple weeks ago, I was announced as the GM of the Capitanes, the new G League team in Mexico City. And I'm really excited about that. And it's going to be a big learning experience for me.
Yeah, congrats, Nick. That's
Thank you.
That's a great path, and most of the time, path to the NBA are always opposite. They're not straight.
Right.
So, what's the biggest takeaway? Your biggest takeaway from your experience in Australia, for example?
From Australia, I think, well, actually from Australia, it was really, I still want to work in basketball, because after I was working at Stanford, it's like, I don't know if I want to do this. It's not what I thought it was. I was not having any fun. And then after working in Australia, the culture around basketball and the basketball community made me enjoy basketball again. They have a great coaching community and just a great quality of life there in general. So I think that kind of re-energized me to work in the basketball. And then on the basketball side, I learned the value of having a good team, playing well together, and not necessarily, we talk a lot about culture, but their culture is they play so hard, practice so hard that, it translates over to games. And I think those were all good learning experiences for me.
You said you did get paid in Australia, right? You volunteered for the whole time.
Yeah, so I worked a bunch of side jobs. I worked retail, worked at a yacht club and a software company. So I had to work all these side jobs to make a living, but the minimum wage here is actually pretty high, so it's doable.
Okay. All right, let's talk about your GM position now. What is the day-to-day like for a GM?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different time zones, as is this. So the head coach, Ramon Diaz, he's actually in Spain. And then an assistant coach is in Mexico, and our video coordinators in Mexico, our interns in Texas. So we're all kind of across the world, but wake up pretty early. We watch about 12 to 15 players. We watch, film on them, either Latin American players or US players. We do that about 4 days a week for about hour and a half. The rest of the day, I'm just researching more players. I'll talk to agents. And actually, what's been interesting is as I'm a GM now, and it's like the more you work in sports too, it's like the further you kind of get away from the sport. So it's, I'm now looking at resumes for athletic trainers. Trying to figure out laptops, trying to figure out my cell phone plan, just a lot of things that have nothing to do with basketball that's just part of the job. And yeah, so that's been a real learning experience. It's not like what it used to be when I was video coordinator, when all I was doing was just pulling video of players or researching players. Now there's a bigger, a bigger scope of things that I do.
And when are you going to start to build the team?
The process of actually signing players will be a little bit, the G League's pretty late, but we already kind of started the process by searching for players. Before you want to commit to players, people are asking, well, is this player good enough to be on your team? It's like, I don't know who we can and can't have yet. But at this point, we've probably watched about 100 players and probably have about 300 to go. So it's early in the process, but probably after summer league or around summer league is when we'll start to commit to players for next season.
And what is the most important thing that you look for when it comes to signing players?
With the G League, you need a lot of versatility. You also need players who are, flexible. I guess that's not the best word, but it's just the G League is not the most glamorous league. You're taking a lot of bus rides, Southwest Airlines. You're going to cities that aren't that fun. And then also you'll get NBA players on your team and you may not play. So you need players who kind of understand all of that. You need the agent to understand all that. And if they're all on board, generally it works out pretty well. But, I think for them is just understanding the process of the G League. And that's a big part of my job, is explaining just how this is not like your typical league. And if you're not playing one week, you might play 40 minutes the next week because the guy above you got called to the NBA. So that's I think just having, good guys on the team who understand that's key.
And how do you make sure to help young players adapt to the G League? As you said, like a lot of hard traveling and not fun cities, as you said, maybe also a very tough schedule. It's not always easy for them, right?
No, and especially if a lot of them just played for a major university, or even if they just played in the NBA. Played in a major university, you take private planes all throughout the US. You play in the NBA, obviously private planes, all the best hotels, and then you go to the G League and you don't get that. And it's, a lot of leagues across the world are like that. It's just Israel is a lot smaller than the US, or Italy is a lot smaller. So you don't travel 12 hours across the country. It might be like a 3-hour train ride or something. So the travel is pretty extreme, but it is an adjustment. But we find that a lot of the guys who went to smaller schools, mid-major schools, or even played in, countries that aren't the biggest leagues across the world, they adapt to it very easily because they're used to it.
And when it comes to players' needs and players' wants, how do you make sure to understand what each player wants for their career and what each player needs for their career?
Yeah, I think you really have to communicate, everyone, the coach, GM, agent, communicate to the player about the process of the G League and their career. And a lot of guys will come and they'll think, they should be playing whatever, or, maybe they should have a 2-way contract, and then they get upset and then they leave either to Europe or another team. And then this specific example once, that happened. And then the head coach of the NBA team was asking about the player that left. It's like, hey, it'd be great to sign to this guy to a 10-day. Like, he's gone, so it's just staying patient. And that's really hard to tell to a player when the G League is not the highest salaries in the world. It's somewhat low. It's kind of like an internship is what I'll tell people, but you still get these lots of exposure, not just with the NBA, but teams all over the world. So staying patient and staying realistic is absolutely key.
And I guess it's also hard for coaches. For example, last year I was talking to a good friend of mine who's the head coach of a G League team, and during the preseason they had an amazing team. We were super hyped, super excited, and all of a sudden, two of their best players got called up in the NBA, and he ended up like losing 3 or 4 games in a row.
Yeah.
And how do you make sure to stay close to your head coach also during those tough moments?
Yeah, you have to. And then, it's just, you'll lose your players. You'll be down to 7 players, and the coaches will be like, well, why don't we have anyone? It's like, well, it's not that easy. You can't just like sign someone in the crowd, and if you just can't. And then if you could, you can sign players, but a lot of them aren't the type of talent that you'd actually want to play. They'll be overseas or something. You kind of have to wait for guys to sign back into the G League. So you do have to just understand that you're going to have tough situations. You have to enjoy when you're doing well, because if you're doing well, most likely that's going to stop in any league, but especially the G League. If you're doing really well, you're probably going to lose some of your players. So enjoy the good times. The bad times, don't take it personal. It's just, that's what it is, and try and just improve from there. There's just sometimes not much you can do, but just keep trying your best, and eventually it'll turn around.
What is the thing that NBA teams value the most when they call up G League players?
I think it's staying to your role, So in the NBA, you have your stars already. You have your scorers, your probably point guard, everything. But when you're calling a guy up, you want a guy to do a specific role and do it really well. Because even on the NBA roster, you have 3 or 4 guys who can do multiple things, versatile players. But then like the last like 10 people on the roster are more or less specialists. Might have a couple that are still kind of versatile, 5th, 6th best player, but they're more or less like really good at one thing. So if you're a 10-day contract or a 2-way contract, you're going to really focus in on one thing. And when you go into the game, not to do too much. You look at like what Caruso would do with LeBron. He's almost better in the NBA than he is the G League, because he sticks to his role in the NBA. It wasn't his fault in the G League. It's just, when you're the best player on the court, there's expectations for you to be the best player on the court and do it statistically. Also, he would play with the ball in his hands almost the whole game, which is great for his development to be, play more point and a playmaker. But when he's in the NBA, he doesn't need to do that. You get the ball into your star's hands, you get out of the way, you play good defense, you do your role, and you're a legend. You stick to your role, and that's not everyone can do that. It's really hard for people to focus on.
So I guess also it's completely different to the way the NBA teams judge the work of the G League coaching staffs.
Yeah, it's really it's not just wins, losses. It's communicating to players about sticking to the role, staying patient, and sticking with the process, I guess, is the best way of putting it. Because a lot of players will get I guess lose hope and maybe get discouraged. And sometimes that comes from just bad information that they're getting. But if you can get the coach, talk to them about either the situation that they're in and what they kind of see for the plan of them, then that's key. It's about those personal connections, and that's stuff that I'll talk with the players as well.
Sure. And when you work for a G League team, most of the time you're there to move on. You don't want to stay there, right? So, and it's the same thing for players and for coaches. And you being in a leadership position, how do you make sure that also your coaching staff keep leveling up throughout the season and also throughout the years?
Yeah, it's a good point. A lot of guys, just like players, will kind of focus on the next opportunity. And I think in the last 5 years, and I know the last 5 years, the G League has changed tremendously. When now I'd hear some people, they'll say like, oh, like I got out of the G League, and I'm like, I don't necessarily want to be out of the G League. I did. I had a Laker position last year, Laker and South Bay Laker, and could say pretty confidently I'd rather be a GM or work for a G League team than have a smaller role of an NBA team, because you get to do so much more. Your staff is tiny with a G League team, so you're doing everything rather than just doing on a smaller role in an NBA team. And for me, I want to be a GM someday. So doing this is an NBA GM or EuroLeague GM. So I'm gaining all that experience that I'm getting right now. So what I'll explain to the coaches is, if you're an assistant coach in the G League or even a video coordinator, you're one of probably five people on the coaching staff. If you're an assistant coach in the NBA, you're one of 8. And then if you're a video coordinator in the NBA, the whole coaching staff is probably 15 people. So you're doing a smaller role. If you're the strength coach of a G League team, you're doing everything. You're gaining all that experience. Like, that's awesome. And if you're a strength coach in the NBA, that's awesome. Like, you get to do everything great, but you're gonna have a staff of 4 or 5. So, obviously you probably don't want to work in the G League your whole life, but for a couple of years, I think it's almost better than working in the NBA or a major college team, because you're doing everything, you're gaining all that experience, and that's invaluable.
Sure. And I want to know something more about the relationship that you as a GM have with your head coach.
Yeah, so Ramon Diaz and he has been awesome so far. He's Spanish. He's been the head coach of this team for 3 years. They took last year off because they had the bubble. They didn't do the bubble. And then we've worked very well together. We're from 2 completely different backgrounds. He's a Spanish coach who worked in Mexico. I'm from the US. I worked in college, G League, NBA in Australia, just, 2 different basketball worlds. But we have so far in the last 2-3 weeks, we see the roster the same way, which I didn't know. I didn't know how it would go. Because how they play in Spain is way different from how they play in the US. It's just 2 different styles of basketball. But Ramon knows basketball. He's been watching the G League, watches the NBA. He understands how they're different. And if we watch 10 players, probably 9 of them were on the same page about how good they are. So that's as good as any head coach I've worked with in terms of being on the same page. So you need to work really closely together, especially in the G League. Like, as I was just saying, in the NBA, you have 10 scouts, you have 10 other front office people, you have 15 coaches. So you don't necessarily need to be best buds or, work closely with the head coach. The G League, you need to. This is like no doubt about it. You two need to be on the same page. So I'm glad that we both are.
And as you mentioned before, as a GM, you also get to wear different hats. And so which are the first steps that you are taking now as a GM of a Mexican team? And what are the main things that you want to bring from your experience in Australia first and then with the Lakers?
Yeah, the first, task that I'm still kind of working on is switching over our technology from what they used to use to what every NBA and G League team uses. So that's, Synergy, Sports Code, MacBooks. So that's it's not, you can't just like come in and be like, we need this. You kind of need to explain why. It's just, and that's kind of a first thing ever. It's just, I haven't had to do that before. With the Lakers, it's like, if you say you need a laptop, or Stanford, you get a laptop because they just kind of know, like, yeah, we use MacBooks. Now it's like, well, why are we using MacBooks? And it's good to kind of remind yourself and educate yourself on, now I know all this stuff about MacBooks. I know all this stuff about Synergy, Sports Code, and it makes you just not waste money. You know where you're spending your money at, and you're also explaining to the new coaches about why we use it and why it's going to help them. So, technology's been the big first one, and that really is a big step, because we're going to be using this for the next, however long I'm there. Well, they're going to use it for forever until the technology changes. So technology is the first one, and then hiring staff, which is also something we're in the midst of doing for the next season. That's kind of my next big project.
All right. I guess there is a lot of passion in Central America, specifically in Mexico. What do you expect from this new experience in Mexico City?
Yeah, I think the fans are, I think it'll be awesome. I think they're excited about being part of the G League, and, it's the first Mexican team part of a US league too. So that's going to be really cool, just to kind of break that barrier. And they already did have a good fan base, and especially with Juan Toscano doing well with the Warriors, I think basketball is just growing more and more. And with Instagram and Facebook, I'm just getting hundreds of messages from all these fans. So it's pretty surreal. And I hope we can put on a good season for them.
All right, great. I like it. I want to go back to talking about players. We talked about young players, but I also want to know how you deal with players that are not in their prime anymore. Because I know that most of the G League teams also have a few veterans. in their on their roster, right?
Yep. They're key because those older, not older, they're veteran players who can teach the younger players how to practice, how to be human beings, how to play, and it's absolutely key with keeping your team kind of stable because they've seen this stuff over and over. If you just played for a top university team, you probably won 100 games and you lost like 7, and it's not going to be like that ever again in their career unless they play for I don't know who, like the Warriors 5 years ago. But that's not realistic. And especially in the G League, you're going to have really rough patches. And, these guys have seen that not just in the G League, but in every league across the world. You're not just going to cruise through the season. So they just kind of keep everything stable and just don't freak out because they've seen it before. And we had Brendon Ingram with South Bay Lakers. He's one of the best veterans I think you could ever have, and awesome human being too. But you can't measure how important a player is like that with wins, losses, or any kind of statistic. It's immeasurable.
Brendon Ingram was an amazing story. Do you want to tell us something about him?
Yeah, I mean, so one time I was rebounding for him and he made 70 straight 3-pointers. It was amazing. It was just like, this is crazy. But his game where he got called up and played against Houston, Nick Mazzella and I, the GM of the South Bay Lakers, we were going to go to Portsmouth Invitational that night, but I'm like, I think we need to go to the game. Like, this is way too cool. So we went to the game, and then I was just going absolutely crazy. And the Lakers season was like over. It didn't matter, but we were all so happy for Andre to finally get his chance. And there was so much hype around him for that game too. They called it like Dre Day, and for him to just make his first 6 shots was pretty amazing. And yeah, to see that and be a small part of it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, amazing. And Nick, what's your biggest lesson learned working in such a winning environment like the Lakers?
I think so. It is a winning environment that they've won 17 championships, but it was also my first 4 years. It was not a winning environment, and I think it's just staying positive, not taking it personal when you're not doing so well. A lot of teams, when they do not so great, they kind of, I guess, separate and start exploding. You just need to stay together, stick with the process, figure out what the problems are, and then adjust, change it, and don't make that personal. It's just, that's what, sometimes things go wrong and you just need to find solutions. You can't just complain about it. So that's what we did with the Lakers, and that's a valuable thing I've learned. And I sat next to Bill Burka, who's 92, and he's coached with the Lakers or worked with the Lakers the last 50 years, and he's seen every cycle. He saw 70s, 80s winning championships, down into the 90s, back up into 2000s, down in 2005s, then back up. So he's seen these cycles over and over, and it's just about staying normal, staying calm, and just finding solutions to these problems, and then that's how teams are successful.
Very interesting, Nick. Okay, usually we finish off the episode with 3 rapid fire questions. Okay, you ready?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. First one, life after basketball.
First thing that came to mind was something international, like with UNICEF or something like that.
Nice. Your favorite book?
It's A Wrinkle in Time, sci-fi book.
Okay. And last one sport you would like to work for besides of basketball, of course.
Beach volleyball. I play it nonstop right now. I don't play basketball anymore. So if I could work with kids, coach kids beach volleyball, I would love that.
That's nice.
Yeah.
All right, Nick. Thank you very much. You gave us a lot of very interesting insight. If some of our listeners would like to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you'll probably tag me in it, but Maynard Nick is my Instagram. Also on LinkedIn is a good way to reach out. It just might take me a little bit to respond, but reach out whenever. If you go to Summer League, reach out to me, and hopefully we'll meet up at Summer League this year.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick.
Have a good day, everybody. Thanks.